So my name is Simone Smart. I recently got married, actually, so I'm still getting used to using my new name. Many months ago, I read law at university and went on to develop a career in local government, in quasi-judicial law. I worked for a number of local authorities, including the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, Hackney, Camden councils, and it meant sitting on council committee meetings. Sounds tedious, sounds boring, but actually I found it quite exciting. Camden Council, for instance, during the time that I worked there, I got involved with projects like the King's Cross Regeneration Project. Some of you might be aware that there was a time when King's Cross was not so salubrious as it is now. It was once a very deprived area full of prostitutes and all sorts, and the council collaborated with property developers and business conglomerates to turn it into the thriving destination district that it is today, home to the likes of Google and YouTube headquarters, etc. And it was actually while I was at Camden Council that I put myself through law school, and I was doing that 2 nights a week in addition to my full-time job 9 to 5. And of course, these council meetings that I would attend were invariably evening meetings starting at 6, 7 in the evening, going on till about 10, 11 at night. And then you do the same thing again the following day. That went on for 2 years, law school being a kind of part-time, full-time student and a full-time worker. If I were to try and do that today, I don't really think I'll last 2 weeks, let alone 2 years. But it was a challenge, and it was good to put myself through that. I then decided that I was going to hop across from the public sector to the private sector, which at the time, this is going back a few years, at the time, I remember family and friends thinking, why on earth would you do that, Simone? The public sector is a secure place where you got your local government pension sorted for life. The private sector was deemed by some people to be a bit cutthroat and all of that. But I fancied a bit of a change. So I ended up working for a law firm in Camden, and I practiced a lot of civil liberties law and human rights law and inquest law, which is a really interesting area of law. So I got involved with some fairly notable cases, such as the Mark Duggan inquiry. Some of you might be aware of the August 2012 riots. This was surrounding the case of a young Black man who was unlawfully killed by the police. I also worked on cases like the Hillsborough inquest, which was about the 96 football fans who were killed, unfortunately, during a football match up in Liverpool. So these were all very interesting areas that I, kind of pushed myself. It was such a far cry from what I was doing in local government. Challenging cases, but worthwhile experience. After all that, I then decided that actually the private sector was not for me. And I turned my attention to intergovernmental organizations like the Serious Fraud Office. So I worked there for a bit on white-collar crime, and then moved over to an international organization, the Commonwealth Secretariat, where I worked as a legal researcher. Now that was fun. There was something really gratifying about, being surrounded by diverse, superbly smart individuals from across the globe, all over the Commonwealth. And interestingly, it was while I was working at the Commonwealth, providing legal and editorial comments on a daily basis on various legal documents, that I realized that I have this real creative flair. Secret that I need to share with you guys. I'm a bit of a grammar geek. I'm the daughter of a school teacher. And I'm one of those annoying people who will point out where the apostrophe should go and tell you that, no, that should not be spelled THERE and all of that. So at that point, I started to get itchy feet, and I thought I need to do something different. So I took myself off and did various courses in proofreading and editing, TV presenting. What else did I do? A voiceover course, because I've been told quite a few times, I remember since university, people would keep saying to me, you've got a really good voice, you should consider a career in TV or radio broadcasting. So I did all of those, and it just so happened, as life goes, that this was a really interesting challenging time for me, because at the time, my father, who was quite ill, battling cancer, was coming to the end of his life. And when he did pass away, at that point, I decided that it was time to take a sabbatical and do a career switch. So I turned my back on the legal profession. And I mean, two main reasons. One, I wanted to ensure that I had time to spend with my mother. And secondly, equally important to me, was I wanted to have an opportunity to start my own business, because I really felt that I needed to get more into the creative space, writing, using my voice, etc. Yeah, so I'd acquired all these skills, and I thought to myself, right, it's time to try a new venture, start my own business, and become self-employed, and run my own company. What I haven't mentioned is that throughout my professional life, whilst I was at university, going back to my college days, and throughout school, actually, most of school, I battled a debilitating condition called endometriosis. You may not have heard of it. It's an extremely painful condition that affects 1 in 10 women in the UK, and a rather peculiar condition wherein the lining of the womb, called the endometrium, for some reason migrates outside of the womb and attaches itself to various organs where it shouldn't be, like the woman's her tubes, her ovaries, even her lungs, her brain. Doctors haven't figured it out. They have no cure for it. And yeah, that was a very challenging period of my life. What made it rather difficult as well was the fact that there was very little known about the condition. So all the doctors that I interacted with at the time, seeking help and advice, had no clue, and their approach was very much a kind of there. When a woman's on her period, it's normal to have pain. When in actual fact, there was nothing normal about this condition. Sadly for me, the condition went undiagnosed for 16 years. And because it's a degenerative condition, it meant that at the time when we did realize what was going on, things had gotten quite critical for me. So there were lots of periods when I was rushed in and out of hospital, spent lots of time in accident and emergency, being put on morphine for the pain, etc. I then also had to have a series of operations, which led to a number of complications, etc., etc. But life is funny. So fast forward to the point when I decided to take a career break. Because of what I'd gone through in the past, and knowing how challenging it was for me, feeling rather isolated, because it's not the thing, when women suffer with gynecological conditions and problems, it's not the done thing to share and to be divulging information to people. So there's a lot of suffering in silence, not just me, but a lot of other people who I found out were suffering with the same condition. So I wanted to turn that on its head. And so what did I do? I decided to start my own YouTube channel and start vlogging about endometriosis. It took me completely out of my comfort zone, because by nature, I'm a very private individual. Some of my friends who know me and, when they look at my social media, might not think so. But I just felt so strongly about the issue that I had to reach out and see where I could make a difference. I know that back then when I was struggling, if I knew of organizations or other women online where I could, speak to them and get advice, and even if it's just to have a chat, to know that I'm, doing the right thing, it would have made a difference. So I did the YouTube channel. That went really well. It was great to be able to meet women from across the world, getting in touch, leaving comments, seeking advice, etc. I then took it one step further, and I decided to get some professional and personal coaching, because at this point I was now transitioning from the private sector, public sector, to now becoming a self-employed individual. And that's like a whole new terrain that was completely uncharted territory for me. And long story short, I then decided to also, an opportunity presented itself, and I decided to write about it. There was a book anthology that I was told about called Navigating Life. And the brief was quite simple. It was all women, all female authors, and we had to write about a time that we went through a very challenging period in our lives, but more importantly, about how we navigated and came out of that period. And I'm proud to say that that made me an Amazon #1 best-selling author for that period, anyway, when the book was launched. And since then, I've gone on to do a whole host of other things with the business. I am now a professional proofreader, editor. I host book launches. I use my voice. I create audiobooks, and it's fantastic. It's taught me the power of, being very spirit-led, and just despite trials and tribulations, which are always going to be there, to just keep on persevering, because it's the trials that you can turn into triumphs. There's always, there's no testimony without that testing period. You're never going to have a message to share with people without going through some kind of mess. But speaking of stories, as it's Black History Month, I thought it would be nice to save the best till the last. And before I actually launch into, who I'd like to celebrate during this period, I thought I'll flip the script a bit, turn it around, and ask you guys, because it'd be great to get some interaction going. I'm sure you're probably tired of hearing my voice by now. Just one question. I mean, when you hear the term Black History Month, what immediately springs to mind? Just first thoughts. I mean, feel free to unmute and share your thoughts.
So for me, with Black History Month, it's great because I think it educates people, but I feel that it shouldn't just be a month. It should be throughout the year that we celebrate all cultures, including Black cultures. But like I say, it's an opportunity for that month for people who may not interact with very many Black people, have Black friends. It's a time to educate people, but it should be something that is constantly celebrated.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Black excellence, excellence should be a standard. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Tom, sorry. I think of a social worker who I worked with at university who became a lecturer. Her name was Dawn Lawrence, and she joined the university and put together the first kind of acknowledged Black History Month for the university. So shared lots of stories and resources that people could go, but then also laid the challenge that it's not my job to educate you. So, use this as a jumping off point almost to then to learn more and educate yourself, and that's something I've tried to carry with since then.
Fantastic. A lifelong thing, it's all around us.
Hi there, I'm James. Just to echo the previous 2 points, I guess for me, what it really always brings back for me is how much education my country and my fellow citizens we're on a journey in Scotland, but we're only at the very beginning of the journey, and there's some people who are really, really active and are really, really well educated and well read on this, but the majority of the population in Scotland, and I think you could extrapolate that across the whole of the UK, have no idea whatsoever the extent to which their present economy and present society is built upon some really, really challenging history that extended over centuries. And I think the Scottish challenge is a particularly unique one because traditionally we haven't had a diverse society. So we've been able to almost blame other people and give responsibility to other people. And we've never actually had a situation where we've been aware of our own historical input in terms of that global history.
I hear you. Yeah, that's a really good point, James. And again, history is so important because if we don't have a true understanding and appreciation for what happened in the past, then how are we going to deal with present day situations? I always think it's rather unfortunate when, sometimes you encounter some individuals who, if the whole slavery conversation comes up, and people will get quite uncomfortable and not want to talk about it, even if you're just having normal discourse It's not about finger pointing anymore. Obviously, that happened centuries ago, but it's just really about the appreciation and understanding where we once were and where we are today and what we still need to do. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, well, as I mulled over which fitting figurehead to celebrate, today, Black History Month, next month, for the rest of the year, because it's not just confined to 31 days, I realized that it's the unsung heroes and heroines sometimes in our communities that need recognition and celebration. And those individuals who are doing, ordinary individuals, should I say, who are doing extraordinary things behind the scenes. And the lady I'd like to celebrate today is called Dr. Belmont Williams. I'll be very surprised if any of you have heard of her. I'm very proud to say that she's an auntie. She is an obstetrician and gynecologist, and she hails from Freetown, Sierra Leone, West Africa, which is where my family also come from. She turns 92 this year, and she still possesses the intellect and razor-sharp wit of a 52-year-old. Whenever I talk to my auntie on the phone, we can talk for hours about all sorts of things. She keeps a very low profile, so I'm afraid you're not likely to find her on social media, on Instagram or Facebook. So all the more reason why I felt this was the ideal platform to just share a little bit about her and share some facts with you. So she was born to an educationist in the 1930s in Sierra Leone, West Africa. And when she proudly announced to her dad, aged 10, that she wanted to become a doctor, her dad's reaction was, crikey, where are we going to find the funds to, get her through education? But that wasn't an issue. They got through it, and she went on to become a doctor. She was named after a cousin who later died in childbirth, and her chosen profession meant that she could help save the lives of women during pregnancy and childbirth, something that became a passion of hers. I jotted a few notes just so I could remember the salient points that I want to share with you. So she was the first female in sub-Saharan Africa to pass the exams in 1967 to become a member of the Royal College of Obs and Gynae. She was the first woman in Africa to become a member of the Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. I knew I was going to trip over that word. She was also the first of all the doctors in the whole of West Africa to become a fellow of both the College of Surgeons and Physicians. And she was the first chief medical officer who had both clinical medical specialties and a public health qualification. Her reach is global, having worked in various countries, including Egypt, the US, and of course, the UK. She's done some amazing work where she's tried to integrate women's societies into primary healthcare. She didn't confine herself to just the comfortable capital. She didn't confine herself to the comfortable capital of Freetown, but she ventured into provinces, the villages, where she got involved with female genital mutilation, for instance. She also turned her hand to traditional birth attendance, training women to seek out and embrace healthcare. And one of the things that she identified as a factor contributing to high mortality rate amongst children and women. There's, in Africa, you have lots of, obviously in different countries, you have lots of provinces, villages where life is very different to big cities. And in those villages, you have a lot of cultural practices. And those cultural practices can take precedence over your regular average healthcare practices. So what she tried to do was marry the two. It's absolutely fine to pursue your traditional methods when it comes to childbirth or even looking after pregnant women. But it was important to know that if things went wrong, as invariably they did, to know where to seek health care, but more importantly, to ensure that healthcare was accessible, particularly when we're talking about women who live out in the villages and the provinces. At the time, the infant mortality rate in Sierra Leone was among the highest, and her desire was to benchmark and see how other countries were doing it, and possibly share that with her fellow Sierra Leoneans. So she took herself off to China, and she worked in 4 different provinces in China, just understanding how the women over there in the villages were looking after women in similar situations. She's written a number of publications, and she actually published her last book titled Right to Health, Women, Children and Culture. And I've got a copy of the book, which I left over there, and I'll show you that in a minute. And she published this book about 2 years ago at the ripe young age of 90. So I'll leave it there for now. I hope that what I have shared with you today has inspired you, that all of you can see a little bit of Dr. Belmont Williams in you. Black excellence is everywhere. It's not just confined to the month of October. And, it's the ordinary folks like you and I that are doing extraordinary things behind the scenes. So thank you.
We're all about making sure that everybody has access to appropriate resuscitation. And yes, we are UK based, but we're also an organisation that benefits from a stable structure within the NHS, and we have a responsibility to think about how we can think about the bigger global picture. And obviously resuscitation is an absolutely vital thing when it comes to looking after newborns. So perhaps looking forward, perhaps the best way we could actually recognise her achievements and her contribution would be to think about how we might be able to support her and her fellow clinicians in Sierra Leone moving forward. I would, with your permission and her permission, I would love for us to think about how might we support that.
That would be fantastic, James. Thank you. Yes, as you picked up, she does keep a low profile. On my YouTube channel, I mean, one of the reasons why I started my YouTube channel, I forgot to mention, was to be able to, I've called it the ESCI channel, and that's to edify, to share, to connect, to inform, and to engage. So yes, I started it, talking about endometriosis, etc. But I also love to interview people who I feel have something to contribute. And I've been trying to persuade her and encourage her just to get her out there, because it's little steps like this, being on platforms like this, or being able to engage with organizations like yourself that can get the word out there in terms of her expertise. She's a superbly talented doctor, and I would love to feed back your sentiments, your requests to her. And yes, watch this space through Stella or Tom. I'm hoping that we can probably do something.
And a huge thanks and admiration.
I'll pass that on, James. Thank you so much.
Hi again, Simone. I was curious about your audiobooks and the reading of them. Do you have a particular genre or a focus that you have for them, or do people approach you with projects or narration? It's
a little bit more of the latter. I tend to be free-flowing with my creative stuff. So one that I did, for instance, called For Such a Time as This. I'm a woman of faith, and I go to church. And so a friend at church who is an NHS nurse during the pandemic went through a crazy time, as you can imagine. And she wrote a book called For Such a Time as This, literally just documenting her experiences when everything just hit crazy in 2020. And I don't know who asked me to accept the role to actually be the voiceover and do the audiobook for that. It's on Amazon. And yeah, that was a major challenge. I had to draw on all the skills and experiences that I learned when I was doing the voiceover course, and the skills and experiences that I picked up as an actress. So I forgot to mention, as a side, I actually do background acting every now and then, and sometimes I appear in some TV commercials and films, etc. But we shan't go into all that. But the skills, I said that to say, the skills that you pick up while you're in acting mode did come in handy when doing voiceover books. So to answer your question, Tom, I wouldn't say I have a specific genre type as such, but I like to, if I feel drawn to the material, and feel strongly about it enough, I will get involved with the project.
You used the term spirit-led earlier, so I'm guessing it's a very similar.
Yes.
Thank you, Simone.
Pleasure.
So yeah, I've got this question for you. So in the spirit of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, you yourself have been involved in both the public and private sectors in areas which affect the Black community, you know, in the council, in the legal profession. You know, you said you were on those inquests. How was that like all for you as a Black woman?
Good question. Obviously, it could be challenging at times, especially when you're dealing with cases where it is in your face. And yeah, say, for instance, the case of Mark Duggan, unlawfully killed, getting involved with family members. I remember having to go to the family home and interview his mum and take a witness statement. And you can imagine how raw the emotions were at the time. You know, we were trying to build up as much evidence, build up their case to go to court. It's not easy, but that's when your professional expertise and your emotional intelligence comes in to know how to keep that demarcation. So you really can't let your emotions spill over into your professional life, and you just need to, you know, just keep focused, do what you need to do. Obviously, you're human, and it can be painful when you hear your clients recounting stories and you see blatant injustice in front of you. But yeah, I think with maturity, you know, as we grow older, we get more and more, you know, emotionally intelligent. And dare I say, if I can be frank, sometimes you become a little bit desensitized to things that are going on. And sometimes, in a weird, perverse kind of way, that can help you just power on and get through what you need to get through. You may need to deal with it afterwards, go for therapy and what have you, but, you know, just to ensure you get the job done. Yeah, just keeping that steely focus.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.